Hey you! Today we have a very exciting topic to discuss, and that is finding the perfect teacher for your needs. Now, there are a lot of considerations to be made when choosing the right teacher for you: the destination of where you're going or where you want to travel, how they teach, their teaching styles, perhaps their cost, their availability, their schedules, their flexibility. There are a lot of things to think about, and we're going to be breaking them all down for you today. And on top of that, as a personal tip, something that I've discovered while teaching on the largest teaching platform in the world, a great tip that you can have up your sleeve when choosing the right teacher for yourself. Now, without any further ado, let's get into it. The first point to be made is the country where you're going to. Now, this might be where you want to immigrate or where you simply want to travel, but you have to be aware of the differences in English, or the different accents in English and the different dialects, different phrases that people use, different accents around the world. These are all very important considerations to be made when you're choosing the right teacher for yourself. And there is another thing on top of that, and that is the cultural aspect. You will notice that people from the US act very differently than they do in Australia or in the UK or in many different English-speaking countries. So when deciding the right teacher for yourself, you have to consider where they're from and where you want to go as well. And to give you a very detailed explanation of what that looks like, let me give you a few examples of the differences between the different Englishes that you can expect. Here is one example from the US.
For the good old American life. For the money, for the glory, and for the fun. Mostly for the money.
From Australia.
In the scene, and he goes, "Don't be a hero, mate." And I said, "I'm not trying to be a hero, but the police are coming." And he just decided it.
From the UK.
Hours long. Leonardo DiCaprio attended the premiere, and by the end, his date was too old for him.
Ireland.
Put him on a trailer or walk him. And then probably somebody else to pick him up.
And South Africa.
Learn somebody's accent, you communicate more effectively. The thing is, though, you have to learn the accent in the right way.
This is, of course, not an exhaustive list, but it gives you an idea of what you can expect. The second thing that you would want to consider is your teacher's teaching style. Now, you're certainly familiar with the learning styles, whether you're the more auditory learner, whether you're more kinesthetic. But here, when it comes to the teacher's teaching style, it's also very important to consider what they have the most experience in. Do they mostly teach beginners or advanced students? What kinds of materials they use? If they prefer to focus more on grammar and pronunciation, or if they do more conversational classes. These are all very important things to consider because you have to match your expectations with your teacher expectations to actually give you the best results. Another thing that you have to think about, of course, is if you're preparing for an exam such as IELTS or TOEFL, you might want to pick a teacher that has had experience with that as well, because passing the IELTS, if you've ever done that before, is completely a different experience than just speaking English, and you need different skills and different knowledge to pass the IELTS well, not to just speak English. And there are actually very interesting videos about that on YouTube, that native speakers from the UK, for example, are given IELTS questions and they get maybe a band 4 or 5. So that just shows you how disconnected those two things can be. So it is important to pick the right teacher for yourself for your needs specifically. And now if we go into a bit more detail with different teaching styles, there are 4 key ones that you might want to consider and think about. The first one that we can talk about here is the total physical response, or TPR method, which basically connects the language to a, as the name suggests, a physical response or physical action. So if the teacher tells you to stand up or sit down or reach for something, or if they show you a tree, for example, they're considering the connection of the physical world and the language. And this is a really fantastic method because it creates those neural pathways between what you already know and between what you're already familiar with and the new language and new vocabulary. Now, this method is typically used for beginners and for children because it's the easiest connection that we can make. But if it's something that helps you too, don't hold yourself back. The second key big method of teaching is the communicative method. And basically the way that this works, as the name suggests, is that you try to communicate in the language. And this is more of the basic level of communication. This might include group projects or working with other people or even by yourself to solve problems, to fill in the blanks and do exercises in the target language. Very often you will see that with applications like Duolingo or Babbel, that you have some kind of quiz or some kind of exercise that you're supposed to complete in your target language. The next big method is the immersion method, which I'm sure you're already familiar with. This is a method that's mostly used for advanced students, basically where you surround yourself with the language. That you can do this at home if you maybe put post-it notes around your house with the names of your furniture and your appliances in the language that you're learning. But very often this takes the shape of actually going to the country where they speak your target language. If this is English, you might be going to the US or UK or Australia, one of those countries. If perhaps you're learning Spanish, then maybe you might be going to Hispanic America. So the immersion method can take a lot of different shapes and forms. But most important thing is to actually create an environment where you're with the language all the time. You can also do this right now by setting your phone and computer settings to be in the language that you're learning. You can also text people and write messages in that language. So you're creating as much of your environment in the language as you possibly can. And number 4 is the audio-based method. Basically, the way that this works is how children learn most of the time. That they listen to their parents, they listen to their parents' friends, and all of a sudden they start speaking by themselves. This is the exact method that we're talking about here. Very often you will see that with methods like the Pimsleur method or the Michel Thomas methods. So basically you listen to audio, you listen to conversations, you listen to speeches, typically basic at the very beginning, and then you can repeat what you hear. You get the understanding from context mostly. You don't get any vocabulary lists, any grammar or anything like that. It's mostly listening and vocabulary based. In some methods you also get some quizzes and some exercises on top of that. But in the case of the Michel Thomas method, for instance, you just get to listen, repeat, and you're actually forbidden from doing exercises. So it's a little bit different than your conventional language teaching methods. But of course, the easiest way to discover what kind of teaching method your potential teacher has is to watch their YouTube channel if they have one, or to take a trial class so you can actually talk to them and ask them these questions. Now, point number 3 when it comes to finding your perfect teacher is their schedule and their availability. Now, this is of course becoming more and more difficult in our day and age. We're all very busy. We have our work and home and study and a lot of different aspects of life that we have to take into consideration when we're looking for a teacher and when we're looking to begin taking classes. Some people might offer online lessons, maybe pre-recorded classes, things that you can do in your own time, maybe some exercises or worksheets, so you have to find whatever works best for you. Something that I personally do with my students is I take them through the POS structure, which is your personal operating system. Basically, the whole purpose of this is to create a very tailored plan for each person that I work with, so that we know exactly what we need to do, what our goals are, and what we can do to get there in the shortest amount of time possible. Now, the next point that we have here, point number 4, is the cost, right? And obviously, if you are budget sensitive, then you know that this is something that you have to take into consideration. And fortunately, there are a lot of different options out there. You can take one-on-one lessons, of course. You can do group classes. You can join online communities. And there are a lot of different options that you have. You might even find a language partner, and that's usually completely free. So whatever works best for you, find out what you can begin with, what you can start with, and potentially can work up from there. And the last and final point that I have here for you, point number 5, is chemistry with the teacher. If you create rapport with the teacher that you're working with, it's going to make your journey so much more fun and so much more effective. than having somebody that's very strict and, you can't smile and you can't laugh with them. For me, that's very important to create that communication and have that connection with my students early on so that they can feel comfortable, they can feel connected, and they can say, okay, this is the space where I feel safe and this is the space where I can make mistakes, because it's from that basis that we can actually move forward and decide that, okay, we can actually make progress together. If you don't feel comfortable with the teacher, it's going to be so much more difficult to do that. There is a caveat to this, however, that it's not just about making friends with your teacher. You also want to find somebody that can push you, that can challenge you, that can take you to that next level in your language learning. And this is something that a lot of more advanced students struggle with, that when you meet a teacher, it's typically maybe a conversation about the environment or conversations about history, which are of course more challenging, but that's not enough really to take you to that next level, to that mastery or to that fluency level. So it's important also to find somebody that can do that, that can see that in you, that this is what you need, and push you in the right direction. Another thing that I would point out here is to not focus all of your attention on their qualifications. And the reason why I say that is I believe experience is much more significant than qualifications, especially if we consider one or the other. And this is very similar to that doctor dilemma conundrum, if you've ever heard it. And the premise is, would you rather get treated by a doctor that has 20 years of experience but no formal qualifications, or by somebody that has all the qualifications, all the certificates, but they are straight out of school and they have zero experience? What would you rather? Now, the moment you've all been waiting for, my pro tip when it comes to choosing the perfect teacher for yourself online. Now, this is something that I call the LS10 equation. Basically, the way that this works is you take the number of lessons that a teacher has taught and then divide this number by the number of students that they have taught, and the final result should be around 10. Of course, this can vary, maybe 8 or 9, maybe 11 or 12, but basically your average should be about 10. Now, the way that this works is if you take the whole number of lessons and divide it by the number of students, you get the average number of lessons that each single student has taken with this teacher. If this number is around 10, then that's a good indication for you that every student they had took around 10 lessons with them, which is a really great sign because that says that they actually enjoyed the lessons. Now, if this number is much lower than that, if it's maybe 1, 2, 3, then you know that every student that they've had maybe only took 1 or 2, maybe 3 lessons with them, which is not a very good sign because maybe they didn't enjoy the lessons, maybe they weren't very helpful, maybe they weren't beneficial, there was something that wasn't really great, so the student didn't want to come back to this teacher. So you want this number to be around 10. Now, to give you some very practical examples of this, I've actually found a few profiles that I can share with you, looking at their numbers, and then we can do this calculation together. The first one that I have here for you today is one with a teacher that has had 1,833 lessons and 217 students, which if we take our equation, take the lessons and divide them by the students, we get 8.5. And that's actually a very good score. Anything about 7 plus is a very good score because of around 7 lessons, 8 lessons average per student. That's a very good number. Now let's take a look at something that you really want to avoid. This teacher, as you can see, has had 1,075 lessons and 420 students. And again, if we use the same equation that we were just talking about, we get 2.5, and that is really not a good score. That means that on average, every student only took maybe 2 or 3 lessons with this teacher, which is not a very good sign. Maybe they weren't learning a lot, maybe they were hoping for something better after the first class, but that didn't quite work out, so this is typically a profile that you would want to avoid. And let's have a look at another one that you might not be very happy with. This profile has had 2,658 lessons, and if we divide that by the number of students that we have here, 512, that gives us 5.1. Again, not a really wonderful score. Better than 2.5, but not as good as 10 or 11, which is something that you will find also. I probably would not go for this profile. And actually, as you might have noticed if you've ever used a platform like Italki before, this equation is incredibly helpful because most profiles on there have 5 stars and perfect reviews and fantastic feedback, and it's very challenging to actually find somebody for yourself because you are so spoiled for choice that it's very challenging to actually find a good profile. And using this equation can be the ace up your sleeve. So look, I'm sure you already know how important it is to find the right teacher for yourself. You do your research, you look through the profiles, and you know what you're looking for. These tips can help you boost that research and can help you create a better profile in your mind of exactly the person that you're looking for. I trust that you found this video useful and that you've learned a lot, and definitely share your thoughts with me in the comments below. Maybe there are some other criteria that you look for in your perfect teacher. And other than that, it's been an absolute pleasure helping you out today, and I will see you in the next one. Do zobaczenia.